To record. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the reconsideration process for libraries. This is actually going to be one of a few of these topics that we're going to discuss this year. We're also going to cover this a little more fully, well, not more fully, but additionally in February for our Tuesdays with CKLS. This morning's going to focus more on the school side of things, but there will be public library things as well. And then the February one will probably focus more on the public library side. But because these challenges are coming, I think public and schools are going to find helpful information today and in February. All right, Christie, take it away.
Okay, well, we started hearing about books being banned probably back in late summer. There was a Texas congressman named Matt Krause, and he went to the Texas Education School Board, and he had a list of 850 books that he thought would make students uncomfortable, and he talked about wanting those books not in school libraries. I have a folder that who are you? Mary Beth is going to share when the recording comes out. But I put in there several links to what the 850 books were, and most of the ones that were challenged had to do with gender and gay, lesbian characters or stories. But there were some really strange things in there as well. And so these articles talk about those books and the response that the library community has, how they've responded. And the Texas Association of School Librarians, they've started a campaign, and I've put the link there. They have come up with, what do you say to someone who says this about a book that you have in your library? Or what do you say when this question is asked? They've got a really nice resource for you. But we've had some local experiences. And I don't know if, I haven't seen the list of who's here. Hold on. Is there anybody that would like to talk about their challenge, or if they have been challenged? And we'll see what kind of questions you have. Participants. Yeah, my group that hasn't been here, and I'm kind of sorry, I'm frazzled. I'm on a committee and I don't have some of my notes. We had one in Great Bend at the high school. Patty, what was the name of that book? Do you remember?
Is this the older one or the new one?
The older one, the one about the soccer player.
Just
being outed.
10,000 miles from the sun.
Yeah, I think that was it.
That sounds right, Patty.
Yeah.
1,000 miles from the sun.
Yeah. It was a story of a kid, Hispanic kid, playing soccer. He goes out and with some friends, they drink some, they post on social media, and out him as being gay. And then it's the response of the community and his friends, and the soccer team rallies around him. He has a really good support team. And the book just has a wonderful letter from the author that, you know, this is partly his experience and this is what he'd like you to learn from. We learned that the process that book went through is a community member brought it to the superintendent. And then he actually did have a form and gave it to them. And it's what we're seeing is the forms that you guys have. A lot of them are from the state Board of Education, and they're almost verbatim, and they were written in the 60s and 70s and haven't been updated for a long time. But he did know that much to go ahead and give the parent the form. But as they investigated a little bit more and they talked to the librarian and the principal of the school, it wasn't even the kid that had the book. It wasn't his parent, it was a friend's parent. Their friend's father went in. So it was a really strange one, and we haven't heard back anything different. It sounds like it's being handled, and maybe they didn't want to, you know, have this information out that they were challenging, or who knows what. Maybe they decided it's okay that the book's there for other people to read, but their kid wouldn't read. You know, that's what we always hope will happen. So our philosophy here is we want you to be prepared before it happens to you. And the best way to do that is to have a policy in place, and not only have it there and then, you know, pull it out when something happens. Everybody that's involved in the process needs to know what the process is. And if, you know, someone goes to your superintendent or your board, you want them to say, I understand you're upset, but we have a process, a policy about this, and you need to start with the librarian. And then from the librarian, and it should be laid out in your policy. You know, maybe it'll go to you and your principal, and if that doesn't settle things down, then you'll give them the form. And the reconsideration form, I'd have several different things on it. And we're going to go through that, so the things that you need to try to get in place and use the process. And it's usually goes to a committee. It's nice to have in the policy who will be on the committee. It might be the superintendent, the principal, community member, you. If it's in high school, you might have a kid, a school board member. You know, that's something you guys need to work out. But that policy, and I put some examples in the folder, and I see that Mary Beth did put the folder in the chat, so you can get to it from there. Many of you I saw found your policy of how to handle challenged books. What did you think of it? Does it have the tools in there to help you handle a challenge? Would you know what to do?
I do have a comment in the chat, Christie.
Mhm.
The first month I was a public librarian, a patron came in and told me to take Harry Potter off the shelf. This is a public library. I told him that our policy stated that he needed to come to the next board meeting and talk to the board. He did not show up for the meeting and he never returned to the library. So it does sound like the librarian knew what their process was,
Mhm.
but it does sound like what the policy was then, and it may have changed, is that it was missing a opportunity for them to fill out the reconsideration
Restoration
form.
form, yeah.
And usually what we've seen from the procedures that we see the work the best for reconsideration is there's kind of a tiered step like Christie was talking about, where first they make the complaint or the challenge to the librarian. The librarian will try to resolve it. And then if it doesn't, if that doesn't help, then they can take it to the next step up, which for publics would be the board, or for schools, it would be, I would guess, an administrator. And so you need to know what that policy is and what those steps are, so that you're not, whenever somebody challenges me, whether it's a book or anything, I always get a little flustered. But if I know what the process is, that always helps me stay calm and stay in charge of the situation. So take the time to learn what your policy is, or create a policy and practice it before you ever get a challenge, because
Yes.
it's going to make your life a lot easier.
When I was the school public librarian in St. John, our high school collection was also part of on the adult end, and magazines were available. And one of the first challenges I had was they wanted the gun magazines pulled off because they didn't want their kids learning about guns, I guess. And we went through the whole process, and the director before me had walked me through this. And at the beginning of each school year, I found committee members and asked if they would be on it, and here's the reason why, and this is what we'll do, here's the process. And so having what Mary Beth is saying is very true. If you have it in place, you're a lot more confident than someone coming in and throwing a book down and say, I want this out of the library. I am going to back up a little bit, because you can help yourself by not just having the reconsideration process, but having a selection policy. Before you need to know why you're putting the books that you're getting into your library. So with a school library, you're going to support your curriculum. You're going to find books that will cause a love of reading. Think about your mission statement, your school, your district's mission statement, and some library objectives, and make that part of your selection policy. So if someone comes in and says, why would you get this book for this library? Then I've been following this. I've been following what our curriculum director or our social studies teacher says he needs. Okay, it's about the Holocaust, and you don't think that's real, but we have things we need to teach in school. That is really important. And I have put an example from the South Dakota School Library Association. And it looks involved, but it really asks the questions you need to think about when you're purchasing books. The other policy as part of the selection policy you get really should be a gift policy, because I don't know. I know when we were working with not Twin Valley, Pike Valley, the community heard that they were trying to restart the school library, and they would bring in boxes and boxes of books, and these books were old and for adults, but they felt like because they were being brought to them and they knew that this was going on, it needed to go in the library. And they had enough old books, to tell you the truth. So if they had a selection policy, they could have, or a gift policy, it would have said this needs to be current information that supports our curriculum and encourages the love of reading. You know, that's again a nice little piece when you're getting. Now maybe schools don't get a whole lot of well, I know in some schools you've been consolidated, and so they just bring over all the old books from one of the old libraries. That's another reason not to, this isn't going to help our collection support our kids, and that's the bottom line. And then the other piece, and you guys have been really, really good about this, is a weeding policy. That's all part of the selection. Right now, a topic is diversity in your collection, and it's a hot topic. So you should be able to find lots of books. You need to figure out what's appropriate for your library, but you also need to think about each of your kids having some character they can see in a book that reflects them. And that may be having a gay character, and you may not agree with it at all, but as the school library professional, as a library professional in your building, that's part of the professional best practices is finding books that reflect not only your community but your kids. And this is where a lot of the challenges are happening. And so you just need to be prepared. I'm talking and I'm talking. Does anybody have any questions or?
This is Patty. This is one of the times, Christie, that we've talked about the word scripted response a lot. This is the time you had mentioned practice, but having a little set of cue cards maybe that are kept on your desk so you're kind of ready for those things. And in a school, the first time it happened to me as a school librarian, it was a child meekly walking in with a book with a note from their mom on it that says, "We need to talk." And then, we know how the words "we need to talk," if it comes from a principal or an authority figure, we immediately tense up a little bit. And when it happened to me the first time in a public library setting, it was somebody threw a book across the desk and said, "This is a dirty book, and why are you spending money on it?" And so each one of those have a slightly different response, but they both result in the "what am I going to do?" Also in the chat, I put in the parts of your selection policy, things that you need. Those are things that might help you as you start to look at writing that selection policy.
Yeah, there's good examples that I've put in the folder for you to do that.
So this is Mary Beth. So what would be a scripted response for a parent coming in and saying, "I don't want this book about Black Lives Matter to be in the library. What's your response?
I would say, tell me, what's bothering you? Have you read the book? Have you read the whole book? Explain why I would have that book there, because I already have done that in the selection policy. I don't know, what do you think? What do you think would help someone understand why the book is in there? I'll tell you, I've never been asked why is this book in your library. It's been just, this was a waste of money. It was a dust bunny. It was a book about a dust bunny. Well, it's in it because kids think it's hilarious, but that isn't what she wanted to hear, and usually I'll tell you, sometimes if you just let them come in and talk, what's bothering them about this book, and then you say, okay, this is why we have it, this is how it's used, and then say, if you'll tell if it's diffused or not. If it's not diffused, you offer them the form, the reconsideration form. If it is diffused, just thank them for their input, and tell them that's good to know that other parents may feel the same or something. I don't know.
I agree with the thank you. No matter how the challenge is addressed, whether it's this is trash and it shouldn't be there, or why is this on here, or how dare you put this in the library, however it's phrased, I think the response the hardest part is for me is I mirror people's emotions back. So when somebody comes in and they're angry, I have to make sure that I respond calmly. But I think when I've had challenges, I say, thank you for sharing your concern with me. Can you elaborate more? Oh, did you read this book? Where did you find out about this book? I really kind of go over all the questions that the reconsideration form asks, but I try to do it in a conversational way. So that reconsideration form, which I'll share another sample of one in the chat here in a little bit, but that kind of gives you your script, because you can say, oh, well, what's your concern? Where did you learn about it? Have you viewed the whole movie or the whole book? Did you read it all the way through? And let them share their concerns. And the challenge here is to let them talk without interrupting them and without trying to lead the conversation, if possible. I know when people get angry, sometimes you have to just diffuse the situation, but we're gonna say, let them talk, and then you can talk about, thank you for sharing your concerns. This is how we select books. This is how we, this is why we pick what we pick. These are our goals for the library. So then, like Christie was talking about, looking at your curriculum to support your curriculum for school, but also support your mission and your vision for your schools, and support those as well, or your mission and vision for your public library. And then you can ask them, do you need to take this a step farther? What results would you like to see? And sometimes it's just, I don't want it on the shelves. Sometimes it's like, I don't think it should be shelved here. And sometimes it's like, I just wanted you to hear me. And sometimes it's, I want to take this to the board, and then the board would review it, or the administration of the school would then review it and move it a step further. Are there any questions?
This is Holly from Great Bend School District, and I think you hit it on the nose there, that 90% of the parents or patron, adults, they just want to be heard. And usually once they're heard, they will get the form and they'll be like, okay, I don't need to go any further with this. They just want to voice their concerns, voice their opinions. And most of the times I'm finding through looking at things online is that it kind of resolves itself there once they get a chance to be heard. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I agree. This is the page that the Texas librarians put together, the freedom. And if you want a scripted response, here's some examples. This is pretty lengthy, but the gist here is, okay, your school librarians are, have a degree, they have experience, and if that isn't the case for you, you still are you're the professional in your school library. And you are choosing the books and you are following a policy. And that's how you can handle it and feel confident. And these are kind of the words that you can, some words you could put together. Somebody on social media says something. Book doesn't have to be for everyone, but it can be for someone. You don't have to get in an argument. They've got some good things, and I'm not going to sit here and read them all to you. Politicians, I don't know why we've gotten to this point where they think this is something they need to get into, but I do have you guys seen this YouTube of a parent who went to a school board meeting about a book being challenged?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let's see if I can.
Christy, you may need to stop share, and then when you reshare, click the box that says share audio from computer.
Okay, I've got it here, I think. Stop share, reshare.
Reshare, and then at the bottom left or
Sound.
bottom right corner is the share the sound. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So now there's no sound.
I am a proud father of 2 young children. I'm married. My kids are not quite old enough to be reading novels. Soon enough, though, faster than I can comprehend, so I'm told. They'll be making choices about the types of content that they ingest from books and all manner of media. And as a parent, I completely understand and share the desire to have a say in what that content consists of. I'm doing it already, in fact. I'll admit, sometimes I let my son watch YouTube kids videos on my phone. It's terrible, I know. And sometimes I'll look over and say, what the heck are you watching, son? You can't watch that. It's too scary. Or it's too gross. Or, you know what? I don't like SpongeBob SquarePants. He freaks me out. Veto. And that's my right as a loving parent who wants the best for his kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'd be derelict in my duty if I didn't do that. However, what I don't do after I exercise my parental veto authority is call up YouTube Kids and demand that they take down all of the SpongeBob movies. It's my right and my duty to help my kids make the best choices for themselves in accordance with my wife and I's beliefs and values about what will help them become the best people they can. It is not my right to force those beliefs and values on every other parent and their children simply because it's how we do things. That is censorship, and it has no place in a public school setting, which is expressly designed to consider the viewpoints of all of its students. Now, to those folks who are supportive of this measure to remove quote-unquote harmful material from the library shelves, I can hear them saying, but you are forcing your beliefs on me and my kids. Look, I did the search in the Digital Library app, and there's 172 results for gay and only 2 for heterosexual. Well, I posit that that's because in 99% of these library books, it's a given that they're heterosexual. It's just not explicitly called out because it's the norm.
It goes on.
You know, those mornings when it takes two.
It goes on for 4 minutes, but you get the idea. You wish you had parents in your district that feel like that. That's how you should handle it as well. But you'll find lots of good resources. on this page, they've got some things to use with, with parents and kids, and they've got a Padlet here. This is what's happening with banned books. So that is one thing I'd like you to see. Could you give me a minute, guys? I think my dog is out of the yard. And
That's all right, Christie, we'll go on.
I've got a little bit more about, oh, there's the sample reconsideration form. Maybe we could look at that, Mary Beth, and
Yes, we can do that. Go rescue your dog. Let me get the right screen brought up so that you're.
Brody.
Mary Beth, we can't hear you. We
Thank
just
you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, that's exactly what I wanted. Let me get the right thing so I know which one I'm doing here. Yes, that's the one I want. Share. There we go. And share. Okay, so this is the sample reconsideration form. There's a little bit of formatting issues that I will clean up, but this is the live link, so it will always be there for you. It's going to ask for their contact information, because if they do decide to take it further, you will want to make sure that they're invited and present at the board meeting for which it's being discussed, or the I'm going to say board meeting, I'm sorry, for the school council meeting or wherever it's being discussed, that you want to make sure that they're there because they want to be able to represent themselves. It does ask, do you represent yourself or do you represent an organization? Sometimes it's a group that's coming in to make their challenge, asking what kind of format it is, information about the item. And then how did this resource get to their attention? Did they find it off the list of 850 items from the Texas list? Did they have their kid bring it in? Did a friend of a friend talk about it? So that, you want to kind of know how it got to their attention. Have you examined the entire resource? That's the way of saying, have you read it all the way through or watched the entire video? Have them list their concerns. If they have any resources that would, support their claim or whatever their challenge is, there are other resources that support that. What this one doesn't have, and what I've seen in other reconsideration forms, is what outcome would you like to see? Some don't like that because they feel like then it's expected, whatever they like to see. But I like that because then you can kind of see their thought process, how they would like the resolution. Sometimes it's something that, yeah, that's a reasonable request. And sometimes it's like, well, we can't do that because of this, but you can address it fully. There's no, I don't say no, there's always going to be some misunderstanding, but it's less likely misunderstanding. Well, they didn't get me what I wanted. Well, you never said what you wanted. So I like that extra line. What outcome would you like to see from this challenge? But again, I think that's, I think that is not universal. Patty?
This is Patty. I would like, there's something about this part bothers me a little bit too. In number 6, what concerns you? I like the wording, identify specifically what your objections are. And that might be citing pages, it might be citing subject, but what concerns you can be really, really broad. And it can be that there's a gay kid in this book, or that the F word appears on page 26. And sometimes it's just because if say in a young adult book, the F word appears on page 26 and doesn't appear again, maybe it was just a conversational, well-placed word for the author, and it's never brought up again, and everything else about the book is clean. And so when you have the specifics, it helps you as the librarian and the professional library person to see and understand some of the objections. I also would like to address the organization piece there a little higher up on the form. Do you represent yourself? Do you represent your organization? In the public library realm, that form also says, if yes to the organization, who do you represent? Some people will choose not to fill out the box, but if you watch the process of challenges to materials, and it doesn't matter where, and it doesn't matter public or school, it doesn't matter how old, sometimes that one challenge will lead to another. And as Christie has pointed out, she started with that list from of 850 titles. Well, if you watch the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom news feed, there are hundreds and hundreds of challenges going on, and they're coming from this list. And what's happening is they're being picked up by organizations. And so sometimes in a case, you'll get not just one reconsideration form filled out by one person, but mirrored and just a new name attached to each one. And you'll get, 10 or 15 or 100 of these if they're representing the health of the community or a particular religious or political group.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, the questions here seem to be more of asking for abstract things, and sometimes you need to ask for more specific things. So the wording could be, what specific issues do you have with this resource? Or the
Chris,
wording.
do you have a question from Stockton?
Are the schools noticing more because of like some of the testing, the AR or whatever test? Some of the kids are reading at higher levels, but they're not really the age appropriate. Like they're not really ready to go into young adult, but they read more higher level than JFIC, but then the content in the young adult is too much, the parents feel like. Are the schools having that kind of trouble too?
Chris, I would guess, this is Patty, I would guess that some of the challenges that have occurred or are occurring are based on things of that nature, where in order to meet that grade level or the point requirement, they are reading above their current level, physical grade level. When dealing with children with, I'm going to use the word gifted vocabularies or kids who are listed as gifted, they're often reading high school things at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, because that's where their reading level shows up on a test. I don't think that's probably the primary thing. I think a lot of what happens with the challenges is subject matter, and it's not necessarily starting from the child user. And it's when adults get involved in kids' reading. We want that to always happen on the good side, and unfortunately, it doesn't always do that.
Yes, good question. Thank you, Chris. Holly, do you have a question?
Yeah, kind of following up with that, the challenge that we face in our district right before Christmas was it was a high school, but it was a young adult book. And I think the parent never went any further with it, but I think they just had a problem with, it was about a gay student who was in an online relationship And it kind of talked about that. And I think the parent just did not like that. It never went any further. But my question is in our policy with our board is that once the parent fills out the form, then it goes before a committee that our superintendent chooses, but nowhere in the wording does it say that anyone on that committee has to read the entire book. Should that be something we look at getting put into that? I mean, you would hope as adults, they would read the entire selection and read the entire book from cover to cover before they just take out the snippet that the parent's concerned about. So is that something we should probably look at getting added into the wording there?
That is part of procedurally, part of making this process work. And in my position before, that was one of the expectations of the committee. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Heather, do you have a question or a comment?
I do. Sorry, I can't get my video to work here.
It's okay.
But I think when back to Chris's question about schools, I think that what I see if a parent comes and talks to me about a book that they have a problem with is there's a bunch of books that are classified as high interest, low readability. And what I've seen is what my experience has been is they've inserted a lot of curse words in those books. And so then it becomes a language issue for some of them. I don't know that the kids notice it as much as a parent picked it up and looked at it and said, oh my gosh, the language in this is terrible. And so that has been something that we look at. And I've actually talked to some publishers about that, the language in some of these books. I know they're trying to find common ground, and I know language is a lot more coarse, dare say that right now, but just that's an issue that I'm seeing.
I've just shared the South Dakota policy, and you can see it starts with, let's first address it with the librarian. Then they can bring it to the administration. So you want to be referred to first. Then, show them the collection development policy, the selection policy, that there are reasons your books are chosen. If that is not good enough, you give them the reconsideration form. Here it says, we'll appoint a committee, and this is who will be on it. That committee, you have to give them time to read the book in full. So I don't think it's too much to ask to have the parent, if they haven't read it, read the whole book before you all get together and discuss, how the book is going to be handled. They have a written recommendation. I think that's a really good place to start. And here is their form.
I see there that they ask, did you read, view, listen entirely? And if not, which parts did you read, view, or listen to? So that does give the option for those that just did part to still make their challenge heard. But yeah, so I do see that point, and that might be the good way to make sure everybody feels like they're heard is what parts did you listen to if you didn't listen to the whole thing or read the whole thing.
How are those of you that are
I get up on this.
that don't have, as a para, are you feeling like you can handle this? What would you need to feel comfortable? Do you have those connections with your administrator that they'd support you?
Maybe the other question is, what's the scariest part about this?
Heather here. I think from a school perspective, the scariest part of this is people are angry right now and they're looking for things to be angry about. And the scary part for me is that mob mentality of like you were saying, they're photocopying, they're all writing the same thing out, photocopying it under different names and handing it to you, and then coming as a mob to that, and as a mass to the school board meeting.
So would having this policy and administration in the loop, does that take some of that scariness away?
Yeah, it does. And honestly, I have the policy, it's back, I've put it on digital, and we haven't had to use it yet. But
Yeah.
I am glad that we're having this just to hear if other schools have gone through people,
Yeah.
because I did have a parent come to me, of course, stop me in Casey's and ask me my thoughts on what is going on in Texas. And he specifically brought up Texas and what my thoughts were about that. And I was very vague. I mean, I was just, and there were, of course, then other people are listening in as bystander. And I'm like, as patron, we really have to know who our patrons are and, what's appropriate for kids at certain levels, and just talked kind of developmental and what I go through when I'm looking for books. But once again, knowing and reviewing those policies that we have, just because they will catch you, they may not come to the school. They're going to catch you in the grocery store. They're going to catch you at Casey's. They're going to, after church someday, they might ask you. So this has helped. This.
And Heather, you bring up such a good point that, that scripted response standing in your school building is going to be slightly different than the one that you get on your way out of church or at the grocery store. And you might have to be a little more direct on that off work time to say, I would be happy to talk with you about this during school hours, because then you're setting yourself up as the professional and reminding them that this is a school or a work thing, because it is tough.
And hopefully the information we're providing you, just having that knowledge will also give you the confidence to step up and talk to your community about these things.
There is a question in the chat. If a library has a committee to review a patron's concerns on an item, does the committee meeting need to be an open meeting that is posted ahead of time?
I would guess so. You guys are kind of the legal people.
So for committee meetings, they do not have to be public. But then your findings or your recommendations that the committee has and they bring back to the school board or to the library board, that needs to be during a public meeting. And depending on how hot the issue is, it would probably be good form to then plan during that public board meeting time for public comment. And when you allow time for public comment, be clear about how much time you're allowing and how much time each person has to speak, because you don't want a filibuster type situation where somebody just takes over the whole meeting. So usually we say we're going to open public comment for 30 minutes. Everybody has 3 minutes to speak. And then you would have to then, of course, cut somebody off if they don't give their 3 minutes. If you've ever watched a public meeting, you will see how people say, I cede my time. And that's usually because, they're under, and then they'll cede their time to the next person. And that's what that's reference to. So the committee meeting itself does not need to be public, but their findings or their recommendation to the that they return to the board must be public and then recorded in the minutes. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I just really appreciate when I reached out to Christie and said, hey, this is what's going on, that you guys were willing to be like, hey, if we need to be at that committee meeting, we will make sure somebody is there. If you need us to find reviews for you, we will help you with that. Like, that kind of took the scary out of it for me, is I just really appreciate the support that we receive from you guys and all of you that work behind the scenes to help us out. So I just really appreciate that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Holly, for sharing that. And I do want to extend that out to all the school and public librarians that are on today, that yes, we can help you with finding the reviews to support the collection. We can also support you in a meeting should you so need us. I think I interrupted you, Christie.
I was just going to say, it's our pleasure. That's what we like to do.
One thing I think is the scariest part for me is seeing legislation be proposed in other states, and knowing that our legislative session just started, and things are moving really fast this legislative session, and we have a library lobbyist that keeps track of all those proposals and lets us know if there's anything we need to be aware of. That's through KLA, Kansas Library Association, and we pay for that through our dues. So that's very helpful for us, because that helps us get ahead of anything. If there's a proposed legislation that touches on censorship or challenge books, we can then mount a defense and go talk to legislators and give them our side of things. So there's some legislation out there that's not in Kansas, but is in Oklahoma that I'm kind of watching. Hopefully it gets nipped in the bud, and that's all we have to worry about. But we do know that sometimes legislators borrow from other states that they think is a good idea. So this one is Oklahoma legislator had a proposal to require schools to pull a book off the shelf as soon as it's challenged, which is usually not the way it works. Usually it's not pulled off until after the committee and it's gone through due process and all that. And that the parent can then fine, or I'm not going to say sue, but they can get awarded $10,000 a day from the school for each day that that book is not pulled from the shelf. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to get passed, but that's some of the things that are out there. I see some shocked faces. I'm not here to scare. I just want you to be aware of some of the legislation that is out there.
So this is Patty. You are not alone, because CKLS is here for you. And we are not alone because the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom exists. I'm going to put a place where challenges are reported and in the chat box, but the Office of Intellectual Freedom keeps track of all of these challenges. They also provide, they have lawyers on staff that can make some sense of some of these languages and situations, and certainly these legislative situations. So we have help beyond the CKLS offices, and we know that we have folks who can answer questions that go beyond what our scope might be. But know that you're among friends here. I know one of our public librarians who's faced some challenges is in the room today. And Christie, Mary Beth, and I have all been on the other side of the counter when it's happened. And we've all been in those shoes. So know that you have the best defenses surrounding you and sitting with you. And so we're excited to make this a topic of 2022, because we think there's so much for all of us to learn and to be able to serve our public and our schools better.
Let me jump in here and do a quick commercial. Mary Beth has sent out a survey and is asking that you put in who your voting rep is for this meeting in May. Please go back and make sure you've got that done. I am going to be coming out on visits here in the next few months. And if you've got something going on in your library that you'd like me to see special, that would be fun. Otherwise, I'll just be checking in with you and seeing what a good time is, and have you show me what's going on in your library. Just getting to know our libraries better. And I wanted to remind everybody, we still have Library Aware that is amazing. And I won't go into a big commercial, but if you've forgotten how to use it or want to get started again, let Michael or myself know, and we'll be happy to work with you. Come out and say hi.
Yeah, and Christie's school visits is going to be a way for you to brag and show off and show her everything that you're doing great, but also a chance for you to say, this is where I need a little bit of help. Is there something that CKLS can do to help me? So, you know, brag, because you guys are doing wonderful things and we want to know about it. But don't hesitate to ask when there's something that you need, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help you. Yes, we did change how we're asking for your CKLS voting representative this year. In the past, we've waited till April for you to let us know that information, and then we're scrambling for a month to get that information and then send out the packets in time for your voting representative to read through all of that information and then be able to come to our full system board meeting. And it was just so hectic, and we're just like, we're doing this the hard way. So we decided we'll ask for your voting rep information in January. It's not due for a while yet, but if you get that in sooner rather than later, that's going to just take that one thing that we need to make sure we get off of our to-do list. We know we have it, it's handled, and then we can send the voting rep the information directly. Also, we'll have contact information should something happen and we need to contact the voting rep directly. We have that contact information. So I want to thank you all for working with us with that change of procedure of how we're asking for that information. Any other questions or comments for us?
Just be watching out next month, and in April again, intellectual freedom is the topic of the Tuesdays with CKLS. And also this month's newsletter is all about intellectual freedom, and particularly about challenges and banned books. So we're not done having this conversation, and we welcome your input and questions. So if you're not comfortable asking them during a meeting, don't hesitate to send them to one of us ahead of time. We'll be glad to ask them anonymously for you.
There is a comment in the chat. Our challenges have all been at the middle school level. I think parents are nervous about their children growing up. 6th grade students reading about pregnancy can upset a parent's view of their child. I think that is a very challenging time. Kids want to be grown up. Kids want to be to know all those things, and parents aren't quite ready for that, or they don't really realize maybe the kids know more than they think they do already. So I think that's a very good point there, Jan. We are going to, again, like I said, have Tuesdays with CKLS in February is going to touch on this again. It's not going to be the same topics. It's going to be a continuation of this conversation and discussion. So we don't think this is a one and done thing. This is going to be a continuing conversation, strategic planning kind of thing. Let's look at what's out there and how we're going to address it.
Well, I am off to my next meeting. I'm on the Reading Circle Committee, and we're choosing books for you for next year for lots of good stuff. So I get to go back to my books. You guys have a good weekend.
Thank you, Christy. I am going to go ahead and stop recording